The Memphis Grizzlies wrapped up their second practice on yesterday, and we learned a lot. But most importantly, you guys have been asking the fifth starter question. Let me tell you something. One guy in the early going is starting to stick out a little bit for that fifth starter spot. Let's talk about that and much more coming up right here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies one of your first listens each and every day. Make sure you continue to like, comment, rate, subscribe, and all of those good things as we continue to try to improve the show for you and all of our listeners out there. But most importantly, man, we got a lot to talk about today, and we got a lot of knowledgeable things to talk about in terms of with two practices in with the Grizzlies. You have media day on Monday, practice on Tuesday, practice on Wednesday. They'll practice later on today as well. And then Saturday is the fan practice. If you're local, try to make it out. I'll be there, and we'll have some coverage of that as well before the preseason game on Sunday. So a lot of things going on around the team right now, but as most of us have kind of figured out by this point, one of the biggest remaining questions is who is going to be the fifth starter on the Memphis Grizzlies. So it's a big question remaining at this point, simply because you go into this season, Ja Morant is suspended 25 games. Dillon Brooks is no longer a member of the team. So you have Marcus Smart. And the good thing about Marcus Smart is his versatility. He could potentially fill in, in a forward role. He could potentially fill in a guard role. But it's the likelihood is Marcus Smart, you brought him in to kind of be a Tyus Jones replacement just as much as a Dillon Brooks replacement. So he's probably going to fill in that point guard. You're going to have Desmond Bane, who's going to play on the ball a lot more this season as well. And there's one more spot. So I've kind of bottled it down in my mind, pretty much like 5 names. Luke Kennard was the trendy name we talked about earlier in the offseason. Again, I was talking to the general manager, Zach Kleiman, and a couple other people. And it's like, oh, well, Luke Kennard brings the shooting and put him in the game alongside Desmond Bane. And we know the net rating numbers when those two are on the floor. You can get something pretty unique there. But then Jake LaRavia performed in Summer League. David Roddy performed in Summer League. John Conchar has starting experience. Ziaire Williams has starting experience. And now you got a competition. You got a healthy competition. All these guys are kind of supporting each other, and they're just playing their best basketball and going to let whatever happens happen. But through 2 practices, one name has just kind of stuck out a little bit. And it's still super early. I'm not in no way, shape, or form saying this guy will be the starter, and I will get more into why I say that a little bit later in this segment. But Ziaire Williams is making a strong case. For one, if you want to read, much more information into why that is the case, you can go check out my story at thecommercialappeal.com, where I wrote about how Ziaire Williams is making, his strong case for this fifth starting spot. But I was at practice on yesterday. We talked to Taylor Jenkins, and we haven't talked to Ziaire since media day. But just listening to Taylor Jenkins talk, again, the most important thing, you guys have heard him say this, the most important key to this fifth starter role is simply defense. We all know Taylor Jenkins is a defense first coach. It's why we ask all these questions about the half-court offense and the three-point shooting, the free throw shooting, and all that. This man is defense through and through. Well, Ziaire Williams, what are some of his goals this year? One sticks out. One of his goals, this came from, he had a conversation with Taylor Jenkins, before the season started, and they were talking about, his expectations for this season, what to expect from Ziaire Williams. One of his goals, this might surprise you a little bit, is to make an all-defensive team. That's a goal of Ziaire Williams this year, to make an all-defensive team in the NBA. First, there's only 2 teams. There's only 10 positions. There's only 10 spots, And Ziaire Williams wants to be on that list. This is not about the fact whether he makes that or not. This is more about the fact that the confidence that he has to say, I think if I play to the best of my ability, I can be on that list. That speaks volumes to me. That speaks volumes. And then there was what Taylor Jenkins said about Ziaire, on yesterday after Tuesday's practice that really stood out to me. And here's what he said. He said, I talked to him after practice about how he's doing a great job in situations using his length, using his mobility. His attention to detail, here's the key part right here. His attention to detail has been spot on right now defensively. Ziaire Williams is doing all the right things on the defensive end right now. Offensively, honestly, you can say what you want, but I'm not too worried about him offensively. I mean, this three-point shooting, it'll come and go. Like, that's just not a strength of his game at this point. And like I said, it'll come and go. He'll have his games where he can make them, and he'll have those games where it's like, oh, my goodness, Ziaire, you can't buy one. He'll have both. But at the end of the day, you know this. He's going to shoot a high percentage because he's very efficient in the two-point area. He can get to the rim. He can finish around the rim, and he can finish, very efficiently in the mid-range area. So all in all, up to this point of his career, I think through 34 starts, Ziaire Williams has averaged over 10 points, over 48% shooting. Guess what? Of all the guys that have started, those are the best numbers. I think he's averaged 10.2 points. David Roddy has 4 career starts and has averaged like 10.3, 10.4 points. But the volume is a little bit different. I think David Roddy shot like 38% in his starts. But Ziaire Williams is a whole 10% better, 48% shooting from the field. But David Roddy is thought of as a strong defender. John Conchar is thought of as a strong defender as well. And when you think about Conchar, 8.7 rebounds per game in his career as a starter. So you're going to get that rebounding, but the scoring is hit or miss because he's going to spot up and he's not going to do much more. Ziaire Williams, you can get more. You can get some guy who has the ability to play in the pick and roll, who can get to the mid-range, who can do all these things. But the number one reason why we're saying this, why Ziaire Williams is making his case, Taylor Jenkins is zeroing in on defense. Sure, when you think of these other guys, there's some great defensive options to throw in that role. But Ziaire Williams, through 2 practices, as Taylor Jenkins has said, he has been spot on with his attention to detail. That's important because, I think Ziaire Williams is like 6'9". He at media day he said he's 6'10". I've been meaning to ask him, like the players did their measurements last week, their official measurements with the NBA. So I don't know if he's giving himself, maybe he was 6'9" and a half or 3/4 and giving himself that extra inch or whatever. But I'll find out. But basically at media day he was calling himself 6'10", and I think Taylor Jenkins even mentioned it. But again, all that's to say is, they're pointing out the length that this guy brings to the table, his ability to disrupt shooters. We've seen how he moves his feet. He's guarded guys like Duncan Robinson, Steph Curry moderately well at this point of his career. So Ziaire Williams is a name we're zeroing in on right now. I think some other guys will make their case through the preseason, but through 2 games, this is the guy that has stood out as saying, hey, I'm coming for that spot, and I've looked good so far. The reason I said this competition is nowhere near over, because let's make one thing abundantly clear here. This position battle for the 5th starting spot, potentially going to be a wing, is completely different than last year's spot when Santi Aldama took over for Jaren Jackson Jr. The similarity is, as we entered the preseason camp, it was unclear. It was a question, who's going to be the starter at power forward? Who's going to be the 5th starter in the Grizzlies lineup? It was unclear in both case scenarios. But if you were following last season, very early in practice, maybe at this point, maybe it was 2 or 3 practices. I can't really remember exactly what it was. But it was kind of clear that Santi would get the first crack at that time, and Santi did. In the very first preseason game with the starters, he played with the other starters, and the rest was history, as they say. The Grizzlies didn't even get a chance to play around and say, hey, we started David Roddy. We're going to start David Roddy this game at power forward, or we're going to start this player, this game at power forward. We're going to go small or go big and start this guy. Santi took the opportunity and ran with it. Whereas this year, Taylor Jenkins has said himself, multiple guys in the preseason will get cracks at it. We talk about how Taylor Jenkins is making the adjustments as a coach. He said this thing could potentially carry on to the regular season in terms of how certain players match up against certain teams. When I think of that, let's say Ziaire Williams is the guy who wins the job. Ziaire Williams is 6'9", 6'10", but he still has a relatively small frame as compared to some of the other options. Granted, Ziaire Williams would say he's bigger and stronger than he's ever been in his basketball life. But compared to John Conchar, compared to David Roddy, compared to Jake LaRavia, he's a little bit smaller. So you go against teams that have those bulkier wings, like the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, or like the Lakers who may throw, LeBron, at small forward in certain stretches. Against certain teams, you're going to want to get probably a little more beef in those matchups. But at the end of the day, this is about Ziaire Williams making his case. He defensively has stood out. We know what he can bring to the table offensively. His role will be kind of centered around starting off as that 3-and-D option. But again, Taylor Jenkins has said it. Ziaire himself has said it. There is opportunity there for him to expand his offensive role beyond that. So speaking of expanding roles, Jaren Jackson Jr. is trying to expand his role. I'm going to tell you what he's doing to do just that just in a second here. But before we get to that, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by none other than Birddogs. Because look, here's the thing. It's October. Yes, it's October, but guess what? I still can wear my Birddogs shorts because right here in Memphis, we're feeling good. And if you don't know anything about the Birddogs shorts, let me tell you something. Birddogs make you look good because the stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg, and it gives you a nice sculpted look. Even if you're out there skipping leg day, you still can get a little sculpted look. But Birddogs shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. Man, look, I got my Birddog shorts. And I might wear them to practice today because, again, the weather's good out here in Memphis. The weather feels real good, so I might wear my Birddog shorts. But here's the thing about Birddogs, man. You can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, or you can enter the promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. Again, the weather's still, hey, if you're in Memphis or in the South anywhere, the weather's still a little hot. You can get you a free Birddogs water bottle. All you got to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Enter the promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle. Look, you won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that. But coming up on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about what Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing to make himself a better player for the Memphis Grizzlies. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. We have a lot to talk about in today's episode as we recap what we saw day 2 of practice with the Memphis Grizzlies. The first thing that I talked about is Ziaire Williams making his case as the 5th starter for the Memphis Grizzlies. Again, if you want to go check out even more details about why that is the case, go check out my story at commercialappeal.com, and you can read through it, what Taylor Jenkins, what Ziaire Williams have said, what I've seen with my eyes, and everything else up to this point. But here's the thing with Jaren Jackson Jr. He's good. He ended the regular season playing really good basketball. I don't know if you guys remember, up until March, Jaren was pretty much every month. I think he had an 18-point per game month. He had a 15-point per game month. Had 17 points per game in a couple months. But then March happened. You remember what happened in March. It's when Morant got suspended. But March happened for Jaren Jackson Jr. And he averaged over 20 points per game for the first time in a month in well over a year. And then there was a four-game sample size in April. Just 4. But 31 points per game. Jaren Jackson Jr. did that. It's only 4 games, but 31 points per game. Sure, the Lakers series, he struggled. I know he had the really good game early in the series, and the Lakers had to make the switch defensively. But he struggled in the Lakers series, I think, in part, even though Steven Adams wasn't there in March. But that's one of those series where Steven Adams' absence really stood out because the Lakers, again, on most nights, I've said this a bunch, what makes Jaren Jackson Jr.'s season projected to be so dominant is he's going to be bigger, stronger than pretty much everyone who guards him this season. Everyone who guards him for a large chunk of the game. Excuse me. He's 6'11". He told me he's up to 260 pounds. Jaren Jackson Jr. came into the league like 215, 220. He's like 260 now. So dude is a low. He's playing power forward, 6'11", 260. That's NBA center size these days. So you got Steven Adams alongside him. And here's the battle. Here's why it works out for the Grizzlies. You're not going to put a smaller guy on Steven Adams. Even though he's limited on an offensive perspective from a scoring standpoint, he's still probably the strongest man. And I'm saying probably like 6 or 7 NBA players haven't told me this. But he's probably the strongest player in the NBA. So the Lakers, for example, they could say, hey, we'll throw Jared Vanderbilt on Xavier Tillman. There's no knock on Xavier Tillman because he did great in this role without Steven Adams, but we can all agree that Xavier Tillman is not exactly Steven Adams. Two different players. So with that being said, you could throw a Jared Vanderbilt on him and say, hey, Anthony Davis, go get, Jaren Jackson Jr. Well, that won't be the case when Steven Adams is on the floor because you need your biggest and your best rebounder fighting and clawing with Steven Adams. This year is setting up to be a prime breakout year for Jaren Jackson Jr. as he enters year 6. And talking to him after practice yesterday, there's one thing he's doing to make sure that is the case. You might have saw it on his Instagram story about a week ago. Jaren Jackson Jr. posted some old film. He was talking about, man, Dirk is so cold, talking about how good Dirk looked. He posted a clip from Dirk. I think it was the 2011 NBA Finals against the Miami Heat. He posted a clip and just talking about how Dirk looked good. Well, he kind of expanded on that thought process. And not only has he been watching a lot of Dirk, he's been watching Kevin Garnett as well. Two of the greatest power forwards to play, two very offensively skilled power forwards. And you may say, okay, well, what is he trying to take from the games? Is he trying to learn a one-legged fadeaway? Is he trying to, take Kevin Garnett's medium-range face-up? Actually, it's a little bit deeper than that. And Grizzlies fans, I think you're going to love to hear this part. He's learning to play with better pace. Learning to play with better pace. Now, let me tell you what that means because Jaren made sure to point out that pace in this case is not just zooming past guys and, we talk about how the Grizzlies like to get up and down and all that. It's actually the opposite, Jaren Jackson Jr. said yesterday. He said, it's about slowing down and being able to break down the defense. Check this out. And kind of decipher double teams and play better out of double teams. So Jaren is working on the right parts of his games because if you followed Locked On Grizzlies in the summer, you heard me and Joe emphasize that Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to be a better playmaker. He has to be a better playmaker for the Grizzlies, and he's going to be put in a situation early in the season with no job. He's going to get a lot of double teams, and he has to improve in those situations. He ranked very poorly as a playmaker last season in the NBA, and up to this point in his career, talking about he's entering his 6th year, each of his first 5 seasons, he had more turnovers than assists. Well, the double teams are going to come. The opportunities are going to be there. And watching Kevin Garnett and Dirk Nowitzki have kind of helped him in terms of looking at how those guys break down the double teams. And here's a little bit of what he said. He said the pace right now is so big. The best players in the NBA right now, they have the pace. And then he said, yes, mainly the guys from overseas. And then he said Dirk and Kevin Garnett, they both had great pace, especially later in their careers. And he said it works. It works. If Jaren Jackson Jr. learns to play with better pace, he learns how to decipher those double teams. All-star. We're talking about more than all-star next year if that's the case. I mean, dare I say all NBA? It's possible if this guy shows the ability to really break down double teams, where they're coming from, and how to pass out of it. Kevin Garnett is a really good guy to look at with that because guess what? When he was in Minnesota, he saw a lot of it. And, I mean, later in his career, as Jaren Jackson Jr. pointed out, he played at a slower pace and that allowed him to see the floor well, and really break down, what he was seeing. And Dirk pretty much saw double teams for the most part of his career. So two real good guys to look at from that perspective. We'll see how it helps out Jaren Jackson Jr. because him passing out of double teams is going to be an important point for the Grizzlies early on in the season. We always talk about how the half-court offense needs to improve. That is a big reason that could really help the half-court offense improve. Here's another thing that could help the half-court offense improve. The Grizzlies are doing it at practice. We'll talk about that coming up. But before we get to that, we got to talk about FanDuel, because FanDuel is simply where you make every moment more. And look, if you're still new out there, I'm going to present you with a great opportunity at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets, and it's guaranteed. Look, people have come to me and said, Damichael, I did the $200 bonus bet, and it's 100% legit. All you have to do is place a $5 bet. It's so simple. You just go there and say, hey, like tonight, the Washington Commanders are playing the Chicago Bears. I'm going to put a $5 bet on the Washington Commanders winning the game. Then, boom, $200 in bonus bets coming your way. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, man, look, there's no better time than right now to get on the action. Everyone knows, and some of you may say March, but to me, October is the best sports month out there. You got baseball. You got the NBA is slowly getting here as preseason comes in, but you got the MLB playoffs, you got college football, NFL, and much more going on. And here's the thing about FanDuel. It's so easy to use as an app, and there's a wide range of betting options. I'm talking about you can bet the spread, you can do player props, you can do over-unders, you can do much more. All you got to do right now is visit FanDuel.com/locked on. Again, visit FanDuel.com/locked on to take advantage of this opportunity. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about a key development at practice that I've noticed that could help the Grizzlies be a better offensive team. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, going solo today without my co-host Joe Mullinax getting a well-deserved day off. But we got a lot to talk about so far. And just to recap, if you're tuning in at this point, if you say, hey, I saw the first couple segments and I want to really listen to the third segment. If you saw the bullet points, if you're watching on YouTube. But just to recap what we talked about so far at this point, first segment was about Ziaire Williams, making his case as that potential fifth starter where the Grizzlies have an opening. And we talked about Jaren Jackson Jr., who's really getting inside the film room to improve. We talked about what exactly he's doing there, from learning how to play with better pace, learning how to play out of double teams, and much more. But yeah, I just want to talk to you about just one of those little practice developments that we've caught eye on. It's a little nerdy for some people out there. So some people say, this probably won't mean too much to you. But again, we noticed that the Grizzlies have been using the 4-point line in practice. This isn't the first year. I think it started last year. Might have been the year before that, but it's kind of relatively new. They've only been doing it for a couple years. But as I went to practice on yesterday, I couldn't help but notice that the 4-point line is much more visible and darker, which makes me think that it is a bigger emphasis. So I talked to the players, asked Jaren, asked Santi Aldama, how does this thing help you? And the overarching answer from those guys was spacing. Now, we've heard Taylor Jenkins emphasize spacing and things like that in the past, but offensively, this is something that's going to really help the Grizzlies increase, their spacing and be a better team at spacing the floor. But guess what? When Luke Kennard or Desmond Bane are standing at that line, teams are going to pick them up because they have deep range. So that is a big part of it. And then speaking of picking players up, Taylor Jenkins also pointed again. This guy really, if you know one thing about Taylor Jenkins, his mind just thinks defense, man. It's kind of funny. Even though this year he is definitely putting a bigger emphasis on increasing the offense and making the offense better, but his mind just goes defense. Like, that's the mind of Taylor Jenkins. Like, I feel like he wakes up and it's just defense. Okay, now let's get to offense. Defense. But with all that being said, Taylor Jenkins pointed out himself that, yes, along with how it helps the offense with spacing, defensively, it helps the Grizzlies with their pickup points. That's important because, Damian Lillard's not in the West anymore, but you still got Steph Curry out here. You still got guys like Eric Gordon, who shoots from very deep range. Luka is very capable of filling it in from very deep range from beyond the three-point line. LeBron James, as we've seen, has a really deep range out there as well. And many more players in the NBA. Quite frankly, a lot of guys are taking three-pointers 2, 3, 4, 5 feet from beyond the three-point line these days casually. So the Grizzlies are using that to emphasize pickup points on defense. And on offense, they're using it to emphasize the importance of spacing. Again, this is the first time they've had the 4-point line, but it's very dark. It's very gray. If you've seen the videos that I posted on X from practice, you'll notice it. As players are working out and things like that, you'll notice that a gray line is behind the three-point line. And it makes the three-point line, if you're a college basketball fan, you'll notice that it's certain schools used to have like the shorter three-point line, and then the other three-point line would be right behind it for the men's and women's college basketball teams. That's kind of how it looks with the Grizzlies. Like, it's like you have the regular three-point line, which looks like the shorter three-point line, and then you have the gray line that's behind it. It's dark gray. It's very, very noticeable. And it just makes me think that the Grizzlies are emphasizing spacing to a T. It just goes to the point where I think Joe Mullinax talked about it in the last episode. We talked about it a little bit in the episode before that when we recapped Media Day. There is a sense of urgency around here to improve the Grizzlies on the offensive end. Spacing will really help with that. Because it gives guys more space to do what they can do off the dribble. You know, for a guy like Marcus Smart, for a guy like John Morant, Derrick Rose, who I think Joe talked about him on yesterday. But again, a lot of players I've asked about, they say Derrick Rose is looking good. The floater's looking good. He's moving around pretty quick, and they like what they see. So spacing is definitely something that helps the game of Derrick Rose. So all things considered, the Grizzlies, through 2 practices, they're in a real good spot. They're going to practice again on Thursday. And guess what? I'll be here to recap what we talk about, what we see at Thursday's practice as well. And then we get into the weekend. We get into the fun stuff. Make sure that you continue to stay tuned in to Locked On Grizzlies. We appreciate you for making Locked On Grizzlies one of your first listens each and every day. As I just stated in our next episode, let's recap Thursday's practice. But we're also going to look ahead a little bit because you got the fan day coming up. Then you also have first preseason game of the year. Wonder what the starting lineup's going to look like in that bad boy. But a lot of things to talk about next with the Grizzlies coming up. But remember, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, I'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies. Once again, I'm Damichael Cole. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies.